The sun dipped low over St. Landry Road, painting the Louisiana sky in streaks of orange and gold, the kind of sunset that made the pine trees look like they were holding their breath. Deshawn Trenholm, a seasoned FBI agent, was driving home in his charcoal gray Chevy Tahoe, his mind half on tomorrow's debrief and half on the gumbo he'd shared with a state investigator earlier that evening. It had been a long day, 12 hours of interviews, paperwork, and navigating the kind of bureaucracy that could wear down even the most patient man. He wasn't speeding, wasn't distracted, just a man in a suit behind the wheel, 15 minutes from his driveway in Lafayette Parish. Blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. No siren, just the pulsing glow of a patrol car demanding attention. Deshawn blinked, unsurprised but weary. He eased the SUV to the side of the road near a Baptist church, its gravel lot empty except for a stray cat darting into the shadows. He cut the engine, lowered his windows halfway, and placed both hands on the steering wheel, palms up, fingers still. He'd been here before, not as an agent, but as a black man in America. Unmarked vehicle, dark windows, a driver who didn't look like he belonged on these back roads. It was a combination that always seemed to invite scrutiny. The cruiser's door slammed shut with a force that echoed across the quiet road. In the side mirror, Deshawn caught the silhouette of the officer approaching. Young, white, early 30s, buzz-cut, squared jaw, walking with a chest-out swagger that screamed authority. No rush in his step, just a deliberate stride that said he owned this stretch of asphalt. The officer's voice cut through the evening air, sharp and loud, dripping with irritation. License and registration, step out of the car. No introduction, no explanation, no preamble. Deshawn kept his voice low, steady, like he was defusing a bomb. Sir, I'd prefer to stay in the vehicle. I'm a federal agent, FBI. I'm carrying, and my credentials are in my inner left pocket. I can hand them to you slowly. The officer, his name tag read Mendenhall, squinted, then shook his head like he'd heard every excuse in the book. Get out of the vehicle. Deshawn didn't move. I'm following protocol. I'm informing you I'm armed and on duty status. Let me hand you my badge and ID. Mendenhall's hand rested on his duty belt, fingers brushing the holster. You fit the description of a suspect, he said, his tone clipped, as if that settled it. Deshawn exhaled through his nose, a slow release of patience. What suspect? I'll ask the questions. Mendenhall snapped. Either you comply, or I escalate. Deshawn turned his head slowly, keeping his hands visible, and reached into his jacket with 2 fingers. No sudden movements, no attitude. He pulled out his FBI badge and ID card, flipping it open on the dashboard. Special Agent Deshawn Trenholm, Lafayette Field Office. You're making a mistake. Mendenhall leaned forward, glanced at the ID for all of 2 seconds, then stepped back and pressed his radio. This guy's flashing fake credentials. I've got a possible impersonator, black male, late 30s, armed, refusing orders, requesting backup now. Deshawn's mouth went dry, not from fear, but from the weight of what was unfolding. He'd been through worse in his career, raids, surveillance ops, gun trafficking busts in cities far rougher than this quiet stretch of Louisiana. But this wasn't about crime. This was about a man with a badge who'd already decided the script before he'd even approached the car. Deshawn spoke louder now, for the body cam he knew was rolling. My hands are visible. I have not exited the vehicle. I am a credentialed federal agent and have identified myself clearly. You are escalating a legal stop without cause. Mendenhall's eyes narrowed. You think I care about your badge? Deshawn didn't answer. His pulse stayed even, his hands steady, but his mind was racing, not to fight, but to survive. A dog barked from a porch across the street. A screen door creaked as someone peeked out, then ducked back inside. Deshawn glanced at the dash cam mounted on Mendenhall's cruiser. It was angled perfectly. Good, he thought. Let's hope someone's watching. But what Deshawn didn't know yet was that help wasn't coming to de-escalate. It was about to get worse. Officer Troy Mendenhall paced 2 steps back from the driver's side door, his hand still hovering over his holster like a cowboy itching for a showdown. He thought he'd already won. His jaw was clenched, his mind made up, and no badge, no credentials, no calm explanation was going to shake him from his narrative. Deshawn kept his badge on the dashboard, the gold lettering catching the last rays of sunlight, but Mendenhall wasn't looking at it. He was too busy staring Deshawn down, waiting for him to flinch, to give him a reason. Last chance, Mendenhall said, his voice sharp. Either you step out, or I'll extract you myself. Deshawn's response was measured, deliberate. I'm not a threat. You escalate this, it's on you. My hands are visible, my gun is holstered, and you do not have probable cause. Mendenhall didn't answer. He stepped back to his cruiser, lifted his radio again. Unit 42 to dispatch. I need immediate backup on this. 10-29, suspects armed, uncooperative, possible federal impersonator. Location, St. Landry and Briar View. Deshawn heard the dispatcher confirm. His jaw tightened as he stared through the windshield, calculating. He was no rookie. For 5 years, he'd investigated officer misconduct and public corruption across Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. He'd sat in enough squad rooms to know what it looked like when an officer let ego drive the wheel, and now he was living it. Mendenhall circled the Tahoe, peeking into the back windows, probably expecting to find drugs or a weapon in plain sight. There was nothing but case files, a bureau laptop bag, and a pair of gym shoes. He glanced at the ID again, shook his head, and kept pacing, checking the locked back door handles. Deshawn's hands stayed on the wheel, fingers stretched like he was back at Quantico, following a firearms instructor's orders. 3 minutes later, a second cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. 2 officers stepped out, a woman in her late 40s, calm but firm, and a younger man who looked barely old enough to drive the patrol car. The woman approached Mendenhall, whispering something Deshawn couldn't catch. Mendenhall gestured to the Tahoe, his voice low but insistent, selling the threat. The woman didn't seem convinced. She walked to Deshawn's window and tapped once. "Sir," she said, her tone professional, "we're gonna figure this out. Do you have identification?" Deshawn pointed to the badge and ID on the dashboard. Her eyes moved to it, squinted, then softened just slightly. She looked back at him. "Are you armed?" "Yes," Deshawn said. "Right. Side holster, Glock 19, safety on, loaded, chambered. Standard bureau issue." She nodded, stepped back, and turned to the younger officer. Her voice dropped, but Deshawn caught one word: legit. Mendenhall's voice cut in, sharp and skeptical. "You sure? He says he's FBI, but I don't buy it. Credentials look cheap. Doesn't match what I've seen." The woman, Officer Gannon, gave him a flat look. "You seen many?" Mendenhall didn't answer. Gannon tapped her shoulder mic and asked dispatch to run the ID number on the badge and federal card. Deshawn didn't move. He knew how long it would take. Maybe a minute, maybe less. But what made his stomach turn wasn't the weight. It was Mendenhall, still standing there, thumb brushing the edge of his weapon, looking for a reason, even now. 60 seconds later, the radio crackled. Confirmed. Deshawn Trenholm, Special Agent, active. Badge number matches Bureau records. It landed like a hammer. Gannon stepped back, arms folded, her eyes on Mendenhall. The younger officer glanced at Deshawn, then at his partner, unsure what to do. Mendenhall stood frozen, blinking like someone had pulled the rug out from under him. He tried to play it cool, adjusting his belt, shifting his weight, then walking back to Deshawn's window as if they were suddenly equals. "Agent Trenholm," he said, his voice forced calm, "you understand we had to be cautious, things being what they are these days." Deshawn stared at him, silent. "I mean, no offense," Mendenhall continued, stumbling over his words. "You were being uncooperative, that was it. That was the sentence that lit the fuse." Deshawn rolled the window down the rest of the way, his voice low but cutting. "You never asked for ID. You ordered me out at gunpoint, then called for backup claiming I was impersonating a federal agent. There was no cause, you know that. Don't try to pin this on protocol." Mendenhall stiffened. The other two officers kept their distance. Deshawn continued, still calm but unyielding. "Do you know how many officers I've interviewed in internal misconduct cases? Over 200. You all say the same things after. I was just being cautious. But caution doesn't look like this. Caution listens. Caution checks the badge first." Mendenhall's lips moved, but no words came out. Gannon stepped in, her voice quiet but firm. "You're lucky, Troy, because if he wasn't who he said he was, and you'd escalated this like you just did, we'd be sorting out your mess with the coroner, or worse, another protest downtown." Mendenhall looked away, the words stinging. Deshawn exhaled and leaned back in his seat, hands still visible, still steady. But behind his calm, his heart was working harder, not from fear, but from restraint. He wasn't just fighting for his own life anymore. He was showing anyone who might watch this later, young black boys, colleagues, anyone, that staying calm didn't mean surrender. That composure wasn't weakness. A third cruiser pulled up, lights spinning. A sergeant climbed out, older, white hair, no-nonsense walk, clipboard under his arm. He took one look at the scene and said, "What's the situation?" Gannon briefed him quickly. The sergeant, Reese Lorick, looked at Deshawn. "Agent Trenholm, I'm Sergeant Lorick. Just got confirmation from HQ. Looks like there's been a serious miscommunication." Deshawn's voice was flat. There was no miscommunication. There was a refusal to listen. Lorick nodded, no argument. "Understood." He turned to Mendenhall. "You, back of the line, no more talking." Mendenhall's mouth tightened, but he obeyed. Lorick stepped closer to the window, lowering his voice. "Agent, I'm not gonna insult you with excuses. I saw the footage from his dash already. You're right. He never asked, never checked. You did everything right. Not the first time," Deshawn said. Lorick nodded slowly. "I believe you. Look, we're starting an internal review immediately. I'll be calling your bureau supervisor myself." "Don't bother," Deshawn said. "He already knows. He's the one who asked me to wear a wire tonight." Lorick froze. That part hadn't made the rounds yet. Deshawn let it settle, then reached for his badge and ID, sliding them back into his jacket. Gannon raised an eyebrow. "Wire, internal audit." Deshawn nodded. "Mendenhall's name came up last month in a pattern of complaints. My field office wanted to verify it." Lorick's eyes widened. "Wait, you were baiting him?" "No," Deshawn said, opening the door slowly and stepping out. "I was driving home." He stood tall, 6'2", shoulders squared, his Glock still holstered, his bureau ID clipped inside his jacket. The energy on the street shifted. Mendenhall stood rigid by his cruiser, arms folded, face caught between embarrassment and defiance. Lorik cleared his throat. "Agent Trenholm, I think we need to have a longer conversation, somewhere more controlled." Deshawn raised an eyebrow. "You want to debrief me now?" "Not officially," Lorik said. "I'd like to avoid this going sideways any further. Give us a chance to do the right thing here." "You had your chance," Deshawn said, his voice steady but final. He looked at Mendenhall, then back at Lorik. "You want to do the right thing? Start by listening." The drive home was quiet, the Tahoe rolling steadily through Lafayette Parish as the sky deepened to purples and navy blue. Deshawn's hands gripped the wheel tightly, not from anger but from calculation. Every moment of the stop was logged in his mind like evidence at a crime scene. He reached for the hands, free console, and made a call. "Agent Patel," he said as the line connected, "I need everything we've got on Mendenhall pulled up tonight. IA about to open a case, but I don't trust them to look past their own front door." "Got it," came the reply. "You good?" "I'm breathing," Deshawn said. "That's what matters." By the time he pulled into his driveway, a brick single-story home in the Pecan Grove area, his phone was buzzing again. An unknown number. He answered. "Trenholm, this is Reese Lorik," the sergeant said, his voice low, tired but alert. "You home?" "Yes, why?" "Because someone leaked the footage. Local station aired 30 seconds of the stop. Your ID, the badge, your exact words when he ordered you out. It's out now, and there's more coming." Deshawn didn't blink. "That didn't take long?" "No, it didn't. We're trying to find the source, but it's out." Two neighbors had doorbell cams. One caught audio, the other got the angle from across the street. Shows Mendenhall pacing with his hand on the gun before even talking to you. That's making rounds on social already. We're losing control of the story. "You never had control," Deshawn said flatly. "I figured you'd say that," Lorik replied. "Look, Mendenhall's claiming you set him up, saying this was some kind of trap." Deshawn's laugh was bitter and short. "A trap? He wasn't even smart enough to ask for ID. All I did was sit there. That was the entire threat. A black man who didn't panic." Lorik exhaled. "That's why I called. Whatever's coming, I think we're beyond internal. This may go federal." "I hope it does," Deshawn said. "Because I'm not interested in saving face. I want patterns exposed." There was a pause, then Lorik spoke again. "He said something to me, Mendenhall, right after you drove off," he said. "I didn't see anything wrong. I just saw someone who didn't look like he belonged." Deshawn's grip tightened on the phone. There it was, the quiet confession tucked behind the uniform, the sentence that explained everything. "That's the problem," he said. "That right there." "I know," Lorik replied quietly. Deshawn hung up without another word. He stared at the ceiling of his living room, the weight of the day settling into his bones. Not just the stop, but the years of it. The knowing, the calculating, the always being ready, even with a badge, training, and a title. He sat at his kitchen table, laptop open, bureau notepad beside him, and started typing. The first sentence came easily. "On the evening of Thursday, August 21, 2025, I was subjected to an unlawful stop by Officer Troy Mendenhall of the Lafayette Parish Sheriff's Department." But as he wrote, his phone lit up again. A text from Agent Cheryl Dawes. "Footage is on CNN. You're trending. Call me." He didn't reply. Not yet. He kept typing, because this wasn't just his story anymore. It was about to belong to everyone. The Lafayette field office was already buzzing when Deshawn walked through the glass doors at 8:06 a.m. the next morning. The receptionist gave him a long look. No words needed. On the second floor, Agent Cheryl Dawes met him near the break room, arms crossed, phone in hand. "It's everywhere," she said. "Footage hit national last night. CNN running it, MSNBC too. Someone even cut the body cam audio over gospel music." Deshawn huffs, mild, tired. "Guess I should be flattered." "I'd be pissed," she said. "But you've always had more restraint than the rest of us." They walked to the operations room, where 3 supervisors, 2 analysts, and the assistant special agent in charge, Roland Beach, sat at a round table. The wall screen was frozen mid-frame, Mendenhall's face squinting into Deshawn's window, hand too close to his weapon. "Trenholm," Beach said, "take a seat." Deshawn slid into a chair. Cheryl stayed standing. Beach didn't waste time. "The footage speaks for itself. You handled it professionally, followed our use of force protocols to the letter, remained calm, identified yourself clearly, and recorded the interaction as instructed." Deshawn nodded once, waiting. "But," Beach continued, "this is becoming political. Local press is pushing for a DOJ probe. Their mayor's trying to frame it as a civil rights failure on the part of Lafayette Parish. I got a call from the Office of Professional Responsibility this morning. Let me guess." Deshawn said, "They want me to stay quiet. They're recommending you avoid interviews, statements, or any media until further notice." Deshawn smirked. "Because that's worked so well for us before." Beach held his gaze. "You know how this goes." "Yeah," Deshawn said, "I do. That's why I'm not going to wait for permission, to be honest." The room went quiet. Cheryl broke the silence. "He's not a rookie, Roland. He didn't go looking for trouble. He was going home. That man made the choice to escalate." "I agree," Beach said, "but the optics are real." "They're not optics," Deshawn interrupted. "They're reality. You want me to sit silent because someone might be uncomfortable with the truth. What about how comfortable that officer was treating me like a suspect? No threat, no warrant, just my face and a government vehicle." Beach exhaled. No one spoke for a moment. An analyst, young and pale, shifted in her chair. Deshawn noticed, softening his voice. "Listen, I've done this work for a decade. I've sat across from officers who were angry, scared, broken. But they all had one thing in common, a moment where they were given a chance to choose. Mendenhall had his. He saw my badge, heard me say FBI, and still reached for the radio." Another heavy silence. Beach leaned forward. "So what are you planning?" "I'm not planning a thing," Deshawn said calmly. "I'm documenting everything, filing the full report to DC, sending the unedited audio to civil rights. After that, it's up to them. I'll comply with whatever guidelines they give, but I'm not going to vanish just to keep some department's PR in check." Beach scratched his jaw. "Fine. But I want a bureau media liaison copied on anything you write. You get a statement request. You tell us first." Deshawn stood. "I'll play it by the book. Doesn't mean I'll stay quiet." As he walked out, Cheryl caught up to him in the hallway. "You good?" He paused. "I'm holding. Want me to talk to someone in DC for you? Quiet push on the oversight committee." He shook his head. "This one's going to make noise no matter what. Let it." By noon, the streets of Lafayette were waking up. Outside the courthouse, across from the sheriff's department, a crowd was forming. It started small, a few neighbors with signs reading "Badge, Blind Justice," and "Departmental Silence is Complicity." But by early afternoon, cars lined University Avenue. and organizers from Baton Rouge and New Iberia arrived with bullhorns, petitions, and local press in tow. At the center stood Lenora Maddox, a 63-year-old retired teacher who'd spent 2 decades leading voter registration drives and speaking at city council meetings nobody wanted to attend. Today, she wore a red visor and a microphone clipped to her collar. "This ain't just about Agent Trenholm," she said, her voice loud and unwavering. "This is about how easily some people still see us as a threat before they even ask for a name. If an FBI badge doesn't protect him, then what protects our sons, our fathers, our daughters in their own cars?" The crowd erupted. Camera crews from CATC and WAFP panned the scene, Twitter and Facebook feeds filled with live streams by 2 p.m. #Marston trumped Trenholm and #badge didn't matter were trending statewide. Inside the sheriff's building, Chief Deputy Alton Dreyer stood behind a tinted window, watching the growing protest, his jaw tight. He turned to his assistant, who told the press about the footage. "No one here," she said. "At least not directly." He shook his head. "There's no controlling it now. We need a statement ready by 5. Nothing canned. Something real, like what?" she asked. Dreyer rubbed his temples. "Start with this. We failed to follow basic protocols. We are taking immediate steps to address the officer involved and are cooperating with the Bureau fully." She nodded. Meanwhile, Deshawn stayed home, his phone buzzing non-stop. He'd sent his report to D.C., spoken with the DOJ Office for Civil Rights, and handed over the full audio and dashcam footage. Friends, colleagues, strangers, some offered support, others wanted interviews, a few were just angry. Angry it could still happen, angry it was so predictable. At 3:47 p.m., a name flashed on his screen, Kendra Louvier, a federal prosecutor he'd worked with years ago on a trafficking case in Texarkana. She didn't call to check on him. "Deshawn," she said, "this isn't just misconduct, it's pattern-based. Your footage, the prior complaints, that folder you compiled. This department's got a ticking bomb inside it, and you just set the timer." He sighed. "I didn't set it. I just refused to pretend it wasn't already counting down. I've got contacts in the Southern District's Civil Rights Division," she said. "They'll listen, but if you want this bigger, if you want DOJ to open a full probe, you need public pressure, and right now the pressure's on your side." Deshawn leaned back on his couch. "Let it be. I'm not going to lead a movement. I'm not holding a press conference. You don't need to." Kendra said, "The story is leading itself, but if it gets bigger, you might not get a choice." Across the city, schools were letting out. At North Lafayette High, students huddled around phones on the bleachers, watching the stop over and over. Some recognized Deshawn from career day last semester, when he'd spoken about justice, investigating corruption, keeping communities safe. Now they watched that same man ordered out of his vehicle like a criminal. A 17-year-old senior, Zer Holloman, stood up and said quietly, "That's what my uncle's been saying all along." His friends nodded. The footage sparked conversations that couldn't be ignored. Parents asked different questions at dinner. Teachers added new topics to morning discussions. Officers were pulled into impromptu briefings about use of force and bias training. The protest grew, now nearly 200 strong. Lenora Maddox held up a poster with Deshawn's image and one sentence, "Even the badge didn't buy him dignity." But as the evening fell and the sun dipped behind the courthouse, not everyone in the department was ready to accept the truth. And one of them was about to push back hard. The Lafayette Parish Sheriff's Department was a fortress of beige cinder block and tinted windows, its parking lot lined with patrol cars that gleamed under the midday sun. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the kind that hums like static before a storm. Chief Deputy Alton Dreyer stood in his office, staring at a stack of papers on his desk. Complaints, reports, and a printout of an email from the mayor's office demanding a public statement by sundown. The footage of Deshawn Trenholm's stop had spread like wildfire, and the department was scrambling to contain the blaze. Dreyer's phone buzzed again, another reporter, another ignored call. He rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of a career spent navigating crises. But this one felt different. This one wasn't just a PR problem, it was a reckoning. Outside, the protest on University Avenue had grown louder. Lenora Maddox's voice carried over the bullhorns, steady and unyielding, as she led a chant. No badge, no bias. The crowd, now swelling past 300, held signs that cut deeper with each new slogan. Justice for Trenholm, who watches the watchers. A badge shouldn't blind you. Camera crews from national outlets had joined the local stations, their vans parked haphazardly along the curb. Social media was a storm of hashtags, #badge didn't matter now trending nationally, and clips of Mendenhall's body cam footage looped endlessly online. Some remixed with music, others with captions calling for reform. Dreyer glanced out his window, catching sight of a young woman holding a poster with Deshawn's face and the words, "FBI or not, he's still us." Inside the department, the mood was fracturing. Officers gathered in the break room, whispering over stale coffee, their voices low but heated. Some defended Mendenhall, insisting he'd followed protocol, that he'd been cautious in a high-risk job. Others, like Officer Gannon, stayed silent, her arms crossed as she listened to the chatter. She'd seen the footage, heard Mendenhall's tone, watched his hand hover over his holster before he'd even asked a question. She'd been on the scene, seen Deshawn's badge, and felt the shift when the truth came over the radio. She didn't need to argue with her colleagues. She knew what she'd witnessed, but the younger officers, the ones who looked up to Mendenhall's brash confidence, weren't ready to let it go. He was just doing his job, one muttered, a rookie named Carter, barely a year out of the academy. Guy could have been anyone. You don't take chances out there. Gannon shot him a look. He showed his badge. You don't escalate when you've got no cause. Carter shrugged, unconvinced. Mendenhall's not the only one who's done that kind of stop. That's the problem. Gannon said, her voice low but sharp. She walked out before the argument could spiral, her boots echoing down the hall. She'd been on the force for 22 years, seen enough to know that loyalty to the badge could blind people to the truth. But she also knew the department wasn't ready to face that truth. Not yet. Across town, Deshawn Trenholm sat at his kitchen table, his laptop open, a half-finished report glowing on the screen. The house was quiet, the kind of stillness that felt heavy after a day like yesterday. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since he'd woken up. Texts from colleagues, voicemails from reporters, even a message from his pastor offering to pray with him. He ignored most of them, focusing instead on the document in front of him, a detailed account of the stop, every word, every gesture, every second of Mendenhall's refusal to listen. He'd already sent a preliminary report to the DOJ Civil Rights Division, but this one was different. This was for the public, a record that couldn't be buried under bureaucratic red tape. He leaned back, running a hand over his face. The weight of the past 24 hours pressed against his chest, not just the stop, but the knowledge that it had never been just about him. It was about the kids he'd spoken to at career day, the ones who'd looked at him like he was proof you could rise above the system. It was about the parents who'd taught their sons to keep their hands visible, to speak softly, to survive. It was about the fact that even a federal badge, years of training, and a clean record hadn't shielded him from being seen as a threat. He thought about Mendenhall's words, relayed by Sergeant Lorick. "I just saw someone who didn't look like he belonged." That sentence was a knife, sharp and familiar, cutting through every illusion of progress. His phone lit up again. Kendra Louvier, the federal prosecutor, calling for the second time that day. He answered. "Kendra Deshawn," she said, her voice urgent but steady. "The Southern District's moving. They're opening a formal inquiry into Mendenhall's conduct, but they're also looking at the department's broader patterns. Your folder, the complaints you compiled, it's gold. 6 documented stops, all questionable, all in predominantly black neighborhoods. They're calling it a potential civil rights violation." Deshawn exhaled. "Good, but they need to move fast. The department's already circling the wagons." "They know," Kendra said. "The footage is putting pressure on them. DOJ getting calls from senators, advocacy groups, even a congresswoman from Baton Rouge. This isn't staying local." "It was never local," Deshawn said. "Not when it's the same story everywhere." Kendra paused, then softened her tone. "You holding up? I know this wasn't what you signed up for." "I signed up to do the job," he said. "This is the job." She didn't push. "I'm meeting with the Civil Rights Division tomorrow. They want your input. Unofficially for now. You in?" "I'm in," he said. "But I'm not waiting for their timeline. I'm finishing a public report today. It's going to the press, the community, anyone who'll listen." Kendra didn't argue. "Send me a copy first. I'll make sure it gets to the right people." He hung up, his eyes drifting to the notepad beside his laptop. He'd jotted down a single line earlier that morning. "The badge didn't protect me. It just made people pay attention." That was the truth he needed to share, not just for himself, but for the people who didn't have a badge, a wire, or a camera to back them up. By 2 p.m., the protest outside the courthouse had become a movement. Lenora Maddox stood on a makeshift platform, a folding table borrowed from a nearby church, her red visor catching the sunlight as she spoke to the crowd. "We're not here to tear down," she said, her voice booming through the megaphone. "We're here to build up a system that sees us, hears us, respects us. Agent Trenholm didn't just survive that stop. He showed us what it takes to survive this world. But survival isn't enough. We deserve to live." The crowd roared, their signs bobbing like waves. Students from North Lafayette High had joined, some still in their school uniforms, others carrying backpacks and phones live, streaming the scene. Zaire Holloman, the 17-year-old senior who'd recognized Deshawn from career day, stood near the front holding a sign that read, "If his badge didn't matter, what chance do I have?" He'd watched the footage at least a dozen times, each loop burning deeper into his mind. His uncle had been stopped 3 times in the past year, once with a gun drawn for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. Zaire didn't want to be angry, but he couldn't help it, not anymore. Lenora handed the megaphone to a younger organizer, a woman named Ivy LaJune, the single mother who'd spoken about her sons the night before. Ivy stepped onto the table, her voice trembling but fierce. "I told my boys last night to keep their hands visible, to stay calm, to do everything right. But what do I say when right still gets you a gun in your face? What do I say when a man like Agent Trenholm, who's done everything we tell our kids to do, still gets treated like he's nothing?" The crowd murmured, heads nodding. A few older women in the back shouted, "Tell it." Ivy gripped the megaphone tighter. "We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for the same chance to breathe that everyone else gets. And if they won't give it, we'll demand it." As the cheers rose, a news van from CNN pulled up, its crew scrambling to set up cameras. The protest was no longer just Lafayette's story. It was national, and it was growing. Across the state, similar gatherings were popping up in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Shreveport, in Mississippi, and Texas. Organizers were sharing Deshawn's footage, using it to fuel their own calls for reform. On social media, the hashtag #HashBadge didn't matter had been tweeted over 100 times, with threads dissecting Mendenhall's actions, the department's history, and the systemic issues laid bare by a single traffic stop. Inside the sheriff's department, Officer Troy Mendenhall sat in a small, windowless room at the end of a hallway, his duty belt gone, his uniform replaced by a plain gray t-shirt and jeans. He'd been called in for a preliminary interview with Internal Affairs, a formality before his disciplinary hearing. Across the table sat Captain Helen Warwick, a 30-year veteran with a reputation for cutting through nonsense. She didn't smile, didn't scowl, just opened a folder and slid a transcript of the body cam audio across the table. "Troy," she said, her voice even, "walk me through it. From the moment you saw the Tahoe." Mendenhall shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. "I was patrolling St. Landry, saw an unmarked SUV, dark windows, out-of-state plates. Didn't recognize it, looked suspicious." "Suspicious how?" Warwick asked, her pen hovering over a notepad. He hesitated. "Just didn't look right. Guy was too calm, didn't seem nervous. Usually, people get twitchy when they see lights. So you pulled him over because he wasn't nervous." Mendenhall's eyes flicked to the transcript. "No, I mean it was the vehicle, the plates, the whole vibe." Warwick leaned forward. "You didn't mention plates or a vibe in your report. You said he fit the description of a suspect." "What suspect?" He swallowed. "I got a call earlier about a stolen vehicle in the area. Gray SUV, vague description. I thought it might be a match." "There was no stolen vehicle call in that sector," Warwick said, her voice flat. "We checked the logs." Mendenhall's face reddened. "Maybe I misheard dispatch." Warwick didn't blink. "You didn't mishear. You never asked for his ID before ordering him out. You saw his badge, dismissed it, and called him an impersonator. Why? I didn't think it was real." He said, his voice quieter now, "Looked cheap. I've seen fake IDs before." "You've seen FBI credentials," she pressed, "because Agent Trenholm's were verified in under a minute." Mendenhall looked down, his hands clenching in his lap. "I was being cautious. You don't take chances out there." "Cautious is checking the badge," Warwick said. "Cautious is listening when a man tells you he's armed and follows protocol to the letter. What you did wasn't caution. It was escalation, and now we're all paying for it." He didn't respond. Warwick closed the folder. "You're on administrative leave pending the hearing. DOJ involved now, Troy. This isn't just about you losing your badge, it's about whether you face federal charges." Mendenhall's head snapped up. "Charges for a traffic stop, for civil rights violations," she said. "You didn't just make a bad call. You targeted a man without cause, ignored his credentials, and escalated to the point of drawing your weapon. That's not a traffic stop. That's a pattern." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Warwick stood. "Go home, Troy, and don't talk to anyone but your lawyer." As Mendenhall left the room, he passed Officer Gannon in the hallway. She didn't look at him, just kept walking, her face unreadable. Outside, the protest chants echoed through the walls, a reminder that the world was watching and judging. Deshawn's phone rang again as he finished his report. It was Sergeant Reese Lorick. his voice quieter than the night before. "Agent Trenholm, I owe you an update. Mendenhall's off the street. Badge and weapon turned in. Administrative leave effective immediately." Deshawn leaned back in his chair. "That's a start." "It's more than that," Lorik said. "I've got pulling every stop he's made in the last 2 years. Your folder helped. Those complaints, 6 of them, all in black neighborhoods, all with no clear probable cause. We're cross-referencing body cam footage now. You'll find more," Deshawn said. "I didn't even send you the full list," Lorik sighed. "I figured. Look, I'm not going to pretend we're clean here. I've been on this job long enough to know we've got issues, but I'm trying to do right by this. Do right by the community," Deshawn said. "Not just me. Start with transparency. Release the body cam footage unredacted. Let people see what you're dealing with." Lorik hesitated. "That's above my pay grade. The chief's worried about lawsuits." "The chief should be worried about trust," Deshawn said. "You've got a crowd outside your door for a reason. They're not going away until you show them you're listening." "I hear you," Lorik said. "I'll push for it, but Agent, one more thing. Mendenhall's talking, not to the press but to his buddies. He's saying you provoked him, that you were looking for a fight." Deshawn's laugh was sharp, humorless. "I provoked him by sitting still, by showing my badge. Tell him to say that under oath. See how it holds up." "He won't," Lorik said, "but it's stirring things up here. Some officers are backing him, saying he was just doing his job." "Then they're part of the problem," Deshawn said. "And you know it," Lorik didn't argue. "I'll keep you posted. Stay safe out there." Deshawn hung up, his eyes drifting to the window. Outside, the Pecan Grove neighborhood was quiet, kids riding bikes, a neighbor watering her garden. It looked peaceful, but he knew better. Peace was fragile when trust was broken. He opened his laptop again, adding a new section to his report, recommendations for reform. It wasn't enough to document the stop. He needed to propose solutions. Implicit bias training, mandatory body cam audits, civilian oversight boards. He typed quickly, the words flowing from years of seeing the system fail, not just in Lafayette, but everywhere. By late afternoon, the protest had moved to the steps of the courthouse, where Lenora Maddox and Ivy LaJune were now joined by Reverend Clive Perrin, the soft-spoken pastor who'd spoken at the community meeting. He held a microphone, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "This isn't about one officer or one stop," he said. "This is about a culture that tells us we don't belong in our own communities. Agent Trenholm's badge didn't shield him, but it gave us a window into what we've all been living. We can't close that window now." The crowd cheered, their voices carrying across the street to the sheriff's department. Inside, Chief Deputy Dreyer was meeting with the mayor's office via video call. The mayor, a wiry man with a knack for dodging controversy, wasn't pleased. "Alton, this is a mess," he said, his voice crackling through the screen. "We've got national press camped outside, DOJ breathing down our necks, and a protest that's only getting bigger. What's your plan?" Dreyer leaned forward. "We're cooperating fully with the FBI and DOJ. Mendenhall's on leave, IA investigating, and we're preparing a statement for tonight. But, sir, we need to be honest. This isn't just about one officer. We've got a pattern of complaints, and Trenholm's folder proves it." The mayor's face tightened. "You're saying we admit fault?" "I'm saying we admit reality," Dreyer said. "The public's not stupid. They've seen the footage. If we try to spin this, it'll backfire." The mayor sighed. "Fine, draft the statement, but keep it tight. No apologies that open us up to lawsuits?" Dreyer nodded, but as the call ended, he knew the statement wouldn't be enough. The crowd outside wasn't just asking for words. They were demanding change. He turned to his assistant. "Get me the IA reports on Mendenhall and call the Bureau's liaison. We need to coordinate before this goes any further." At 5 p.m., Deshawn drove to the Evangeline Thruway Community Center, a long building with flickering fluorescent lights and a parking lot full of cars. The meeting wasn't planned, but word had spread fast after the protest. Neighbors, organizers, pastors, and students filled the folding chairs, their faces a mix of anger, hope, and exhaustion. Deshawn didn't come as an FBI agent tonight. He wore jeans and a gray hoodie, blending into the crowd as just another neighbor. But when he walked in, eyes turned, and a quiet ripple of recognition passed through the room. Reverend Perrin stood first, his white hair catching the light when I saw that footage. He said, "I wasn't shocked. I was tired. Tired because I've been watching this kind of policing for longer than some of y'all have been alive. But seeing an FBI agent treated like a threat, that cracked something open." Ivy LaJune spoke next, her voice tight with emotion. "I had to talk to my sons again last night. Told them to keep their hands visible, be respectful, don't argue, and my youngest asked me, what if they still think I did something? I didn't know what to say." Deshawn listened, his hands folded in his lap. When the room turned to him, he stood, his voice steady but heavy. "You don't need me to tell you what this feels like. You've lived it. I just happened to have a badge when it happened to me. But that didn't shield me from assumption. It didn't buy me grace, and it sure didn't slow his hand." He paused, meeting eyes across the room. "The badge didn't protect me. It just made people pay attention." A woman in the back raised her hand. "So what happens now? To him? To the department? Will they fix it?" Deshawn took a breath. "That's not a question for me. That's a question for all of us. Will we keep pressure on city leadership? Will we ask for real oversight, real training, real consequences? Or will we let this be another headline we forget next month?" No one answered right away. Then a young man in a wool Lafayette hoodie spoke up. "What would have happened if you weren't FBI?" Deshawn looked him in the eyes. "I probably would have been cuffed, maybe worse." The room stiffened, but no one disagreed. Mrs. Roslyn, a retired librarian, spoke next, her voice slow but clear. "I remember when we fought to integrate the schools here. People thought that would fix it, like laws change minds. But the way we're policed, it's like our kids are still being told they don't belong, no matter what's in their wallet or what letters are on their ID." Deshawn nodded. "The problem isn't always the obvious stuff. Sometimes it's small, a glance, a tone, an assumption that you're lying, that you're dangerous, that you need controlling." The room fell silent, thoughtful and heavy. Reverend Perrin spoke again. "We keep showing up. We file complaints, hold public meetings, vote. We train our young people not just to survive, but to lead. And when one of our own goes through it, even if he wears a badge, we don't let him carry it alone." Hands touched Deshawn's shoulder, his back, the edge of his seat. No applause, no speeches, just presence. As the meeting ended, people lingered, talking in small groups, planning next steps. Outside, the Louisiana air was warm, the sky deepening to dusk. Deshawn walked to his car, his phone buzzing again. A text from Cheryl Dawes. "Protest is on every major network. You're not just a story, you're a spark." He didn't reply. He sat behind the wheel, staring at the road ahead. The community center's lights glowed in his rear-view mirror, a reminder that this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the people who'd stood with him, who'd carried the same weight for years, who'd never had a badge to flash or a camera to catch the truth. He started the engine, his mind already turning to the next move, not just for himself, but for all of them. The community center on Evangeline Thruway was still buzzing as Deshawn Trenholm stepped out into the warm Louisiana night, the air heavy with the scent of magnolias and the distant hum of cicadas. The meeting had stretched past 2 hours with voices, young and old, angry and hopeful, filling the room with a shared resolve that felt like a pulse. Deshann's gray hoodie clung to his back, damp from the heat, but his steps were steady as he walked to his Tahoe. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a relentless reminder of the world beyond these streets. He ignored it, sliding behind the wheel and letting the quiet of his car settle around him. For a moment, he just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, replaying the faces in the room. Lenora Maddox's unwavering gaze, Ivy LeJeune's trembling strength, the young man in the old Lafayette hoodie asking what would have happened if he hadn't been FBI. The question lingered, heavy as the night air. Deshann's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock on his window. He turned to see Reverend Clive Perrin, his white hair glowing under the streetlight, holding a folded piece of paper. Deshawn rolled down the window. "Reverend," he said, his voice calm but curious, "couldn't let you leave without this." Perrin said, handing him the paper, "It's a list of names, folks who have been stopped like you, here in Lafayette over the past year. Not all had cameras, not all had badges, but they've got stories. Thought you might want to see it." Deshawn unfolded the paper, scanning the typed list, names, dates, locations, brief descriptions. A 19-year-old pulled over for suspicious driving, with no citation issued. A grandmother stopped for a broken taillight that was intact. A delivery driver detained for 40 minutes over an expired registration that wasn't expired. He looked up at Perrin. "How long have you been keeping this?" "Long enough," Perrin said, his voice soft but firm. "We've been waiting for someone to listen." Deshawn nodded, folding the paper and tucking it into his jacket. "I'm listening." Perrin gave a small smile, then stepped back. "You're not alone in this, Agent Trenholm. Don't forget that." As Deshawn pulled out of the parking lot, the Reverend's words stayed with him. He wasn't alone, but he'd spent years carrying the weight of these moments, stops, glances, assumptions, on his own. Now, with the footage out, the community rising, and the DOJ circling, it felt like the weight was shifting, spreading across a city that refused to stay silent. Inside the Lafayette Parish Sheriff's Department, the mood was a mix of chaos and denial. Chief Deputy Alton Dreyer sat in a conference room with Captain Helen Warwick and Sergeant Reese Lorick, the table littered with coffee cups and IA reports. The department's statement, carefully worded to admit fault without inviting lawsuits, had gone out at 5 p.m., but it hadn't quelled the storm. If anything, it had fueled it. Social media was ablaze with reactions, some praising the department's transparency, others calling it a hollow gesture. The protest outside had thinned as night fell, but the core organizers, including Lenora Maddox, were still there, planning a march for the next morning. Dreyer rubbed his eyes, exhausted. "We've got DJ breathing down our necks." National press camped outside, and now the mayor's talking about an independent review board. "This is spiraling." "It should spiral," Warwick said, a voice cutting through the room. "We've got a folder of complaints on Mendenhall that we sat on for months. If we'd acted sooner, we wouldn't be here." Lorick shifted in his seat. "We're acting now. Mendenhall's done. badge gone, hearing set for Friday. Pulling every stop he's made since he joined the force. We're cooperating with the Bureau. Cooperating's not enough, Warwick said. The public wants blood, and they're not wrong. Mendenhall's not the only one. We've got officers out there who think like him, act like him. You heard Carter in the break room today, defending him like it's just another day on the job. Dreyer leaned back, his jaw tight. What do you want me to do, Helen? Suspend half the department? No, she said, but we need to clean house. Start with mandatory retraining, implicit bias, de-escalation, the works. And we need to release the body cam footage, unredacted, like Trenholm said. If we don't, we're just hiding. The lawyers will have a fit, Dreyer said. Let them, Warwick replied. The longer we dodge, the worse it looks. Warwick nodded. Trenholm's right about trust. We've lost it. The crowd out there isn't just mad about him. They're mad about years of this. I saw that list from the community meeting. Dozens of stops, same pattern, same neighborhoods. A Dreyer sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine, I'll push for the footage release, but we need to coordinate with the Bureau first. Trenholm's not just an agent, he's a witness now, maybe a plaintiff. We don't get ahead of this, it's going to bury us. As they spoke, Officer Troy Mendenhall sat alone in his duplex off Verrett School Road, staring at a cold plate of spaghetti. His phone buzzed with notifications, texts from his lawyer, Mallory Dane, voicemails from his brother, even a message from his uncle, a retired deputy, urging him to keep his head down. He didn't answer any of them. The TV was off, but he could still see his face on every channel. Grainy body cam footage, his hand too close to his holster, his voice sharp and dismissive. He hadn't meant for it to go this far. He'd just been doing his job, he told himself. The Tahoe, the dark windows, the calm driver, it had felt wrong. But now, with the world watching, he couldn't explain why. Mallory had called earlier, her voice firm. Troy, DOJ opened a civil rights inquiry. You're giving a statement under oath next week. If they find a pattern, you're looking at decertification. Maybe worse. Worse? He'd asked, his voice hollow. Federal charges, she'd said. Civil rights violations aren't a slap on the wrist. You need to take this seriously. He'd hung up, his stomach churning. He thought about his academy days, the pride of pinning on his badge, the late nights on patrol when he'd helped people, stopped a robbery, pulled a kid out of a wrecked car. None of that seemed to matter now. All anyone saw was the moment he'd stood outside Trenholm's window, hand on his gun, refusing to listen. He didn't recognize the man in that footage, but he couldn't look away from him either. A knock at the door jolted him. He opened it to find another envelope from the department, this one marked Termination Hearing, Friday, 9 a.m. He read it twice, the words blurring. It wasn't just his job on the line. It was his identity, his family's legacy, everything he'd built. He sat back down, head in his hands, wondering how one stop, one moment, had unraveled it all. Deshawn didn't go straight home after the community center. He drove to a small radio station on the edge of Oplausas, a community college studio with peeling paint and a single red recording light. Vernon Slay, a local journalist with a reputation for fairness, had reached out that morning, offering a platform with no agenda. Just your voice, he'd said. No cameras, no circus. Deshawn had agreed, not because he wanted the spotlight, but because he knew the people who needed to hear this weren't in newsrooms or boardrooms. They were in classrooms, patrol cars, and kitchen tables. Inside the studio, Vernon leaned forward, adjusting the mic. "We can edit anything you're not comfortable with. But why here? Why now?" Deshawn looked at the red light, steady and unblinking. "Because the people who need to hear this aren't sitting in D.C. They're right here, living it every day. And if I'm going to talk, it has to be for them." The recording began. Deshawn didn't rehearse, didn't falter. "I'm Deshawn Trenholm, FBI agent for 11 years. I investigate corruption, misconduct, civil rights violations across the South. Last Thursday, I was pulled over on my way home by Officer Troy Mendenhall. He didn't ask who I was, didn't look at my badge, didn't care what I said. He saw someone he didn't trust, not because of a tip, not because of my behavior, but because I didn't flinch." He paused, measuring his words. "Everything I did was by the book. Hands on the wheel, calm voice, ID in plain sight. But it wasn't enough. And if it wasn't enough for me, with a federal badge and years of experience, what chance does a teenager have driving home from football practice with a broken taillight?" Vernon stayed silent, letting the words land. Deshawn continued. "This isn't about good cops or bad cops. It's about a culture that rewards fear over curiosity, control over respect. I didn't survive that stop because I was lucky. I survived because I knew how not to scare him. That shouldn't be the skill that keeps us alive." Vernon leaned forward. "What would you say to people listening, people who saw the footage and feel helpless?" Deshawn sat with the question, then spoke firmly. "Start small, start local. Know your city council, your sheriff. File complaints, even when they say it won't matter. Support officers who serve with integrity, and demand the same from those who don't. We don't fix this with hashtags alone. We fix it with action." He leaned closer to the mic. "And if you're in law enforcement, examine what you're taught to look for, who you're taught to fear. Ask yourself, when did caution become a license for disrespect? If your badge makes you feel taller, you're wearing it wrong." The recording ended. Vernon shook his hand, no fanfare, just respect. Outside, Deshawn stood by his car, the night air warm against his skin. His phone buzz. Texts from Cheryl Dawes, Kendra Louvier, even a message from the NAACP. He didn't read them yet. He looked up at the sky, stars faint against the glow of the city, and felt a clarity he hadn't in years. He'd never wanted to be a story, but now that he was, he wouldn't waste it. By 9 p.m., the podcast was live, spreading faster than the body cam footage. Local radio stations picked it up, then regional ones, then national. Social media amplified it, with clips shared alongside the hashtags that had defined the day. At North Lafayette High, students listened on their phones, some crying, some nodding, some planning to join the march the next morning. Zer Holloman sent the link to his uncle, adding a single word, "Finally." Inside the sheriff's department, Chief Deputy Dreyer listened to the podcast in his office, his face grim. When it ended, he called Warwick and Lorick back in. "He's not backing down," Dreyer said, "and he's right. We've got to move faster." Warwick nodded. "Release the footage, all of it, and start the retraining program now, not next quarter." Lorick agreed. "I'll talk to IA about auditing every officer with similar complaints. We can't let this be about one man," Dreyer sighed. "It's already bigger than one man, but we'll try." The next morning, the march began at dawn. Over 500 people gathered outside the courthouse, led by Lenora Maddox, Ivy LaJune, and Reverend Perrin. They walked down University Avenue, their signs high, their voices united. "No badge, no bias," echoed through the streets. News vans followed, their cameras capturing every step. By 8 a.m., The Lafayette Parish Sheriff's Department announced the release of Mendenhall's unredacted body cam footage, along with a commitment to mandatory retraining and a civilian oversight board. It wasn't enough to satisfy everyone, but it was a start. Deshawn didn't join the march. He sat at his kitchen table, finalizing his policy proposal for officer training reform. Implicit bias, de-escalation, accountability from day one. He sent it to Kendra Louvia, Cheryl Dawes, and the DOJ Civil Rights Division with a note. This is just the beginning. Then he stood, clipped his badge to his belt, and headed to the Lafayette field office. His phone buzzed with a text from Vernon Slay. "Your voice is out there. People are listening." Deshawn didn't reply. He didn't need to. As he drove through Lafayette, he saw signs in shop windows, kids waving from porches, and a community that was no longer silent. The stop had lasted less than 20 minutes, but its ripple had changed everything. Mendenhall faced his hearing, the department faced scrutiny, and Deshawn faced a truth he'd always known. Change didn't come from one man, one badge, or one story. It came from a community that refused to look away. He pulled into the field office parking lot, his Tahoe gleaming under the morning sun. Before stepping out, he recorded a final note on his phone. "Day one starts with telling the truth," he said. "So here's mine. If you're watching this, don't stop here. Share it, talk about it, challenge someone. Ask yourself who we're protecting and who we're failing to see, because silence won't fix anything, but your voice might." He hit stop, uploaded the clip to a community forum, and stepped out into the day. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning.
If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.